is similar to the jurists of Republic of Korea. So the bill would approximate the structure and what kind of angulation between legislative judiciary in civil law, Germany, Republic of Korea, Japan, and such. Then, how do you consider it could appear common law judges? The Justice Single would take contravene the views which would contravene this kind of practice. It's actually judicial discretion, and judicial choice is deeply embedded in the practice of judiciary. And that is the central phase of common law code in delivering their responsibility. So the judge could be more prudent and actually distinguishable about a variety of cases. That would be the condition and actually phase now present in the common law litigation. So how do you consider the strengths and weaknesses between both cases? So do you see it inherent of this kind of argument? How do you perceive the notion of judicial independence, for example, as described with the views of Justice Scalia? And how do you consider the intent of congressional drafters or sovereign people about the roles and responsibility of respective branch? Do they accept an extent of judicial discretion, for example? So the legal culture would be enriched in that aspect, and what a case law would compile to address more adequately and properly the choice of our routine lives. So the controversy could be affected in some extent by the extent of nationalization. We have a small country and more tightened in affiliation and the social congruence will see the role of Congress determined. So the judiciary may do better to respect the will of political branch more consistently of cases. In other sense, we see decentralized form of public governance, which espouse the role of code more fundamentally and more actively. So that could be the central point. We draw some strengths from common law tradition. We value their contribution. So the practical factors, circumstances we encounter in public governance would come into play in other sense. So what a matter of adjustment is actually it's not at that point. Actually, it needs to be evolutionary, progressive toward a better paradigm of the public governance considered. So the article actually delineates subtlety of area we are interested and are often concerned by many jurists of different traditions. So the article was structured in 5 main parts. The article first shows that code in this descriptive claim, the departure from the strong unitary principle would be null. In the case introduced, the Supreme Court would describe the polymorphic principle as novel and dangerous. What does the word novel imply? Actually, the word travels in opposite sense against the essential law of code. Code value is to create a consistent rule. So they are generating laws in systemic effect and should be common across the nations and applied equally and commonly of a diverse quality of different cases. So novel is quite negative. So the description would be clear in the view of Justice Professor Siegel. And the court also labeled this more polymorphic approach principle as dangerous. So suppose you will take this example in structural consequences. So we will reach rule C about canon of construction is now at our matter in our concern. So, what is canon to impose a normative respect for the code? So, how do we conform our conduct of statutory interpretation to any principle, any ordinary sharing of different judges? So we share a canon of construction. That is some point we now think about in this class. So we now reach the meaning of a statute provision in C. C is the meaning we can delineate from the language employed by Congress last century. Then we have considered many cases in diversity to be related with the statute provision. A, B, C. So we reached some definite understanding of statute provision. So the case would be referred to by subsequent court and judges. The court stated in this way about the statutory. Okay? Then it must be applied consistently to other cases. That is the requirement the strong unitary principle would endorse. And this term also is coined by Professor Siegel, not from the court opinion, how very capturing to disclose the nature of discussion. The court stated the other way against this context of operation would be novel and dangerous. So the court has a fear if the statutory language would be understood arbitrarily. So some court has this view about this language, this phrase, this term, and other court would take in other sense or meaning. Then it will disrupt uniform justice across the nation. So the court viewpoint disposed in the case titled Martinez has been on that point of emphasis. The opposite view would be called polymorphic principle. This is also a new term coined by Professor Siegel, morphic principle. This principle is quite contrary to emphasize the judicial choice. Court would be put to more generous condition about creating the judge-made law. The case would be diverse. So the court may derive different meaning. In the case the case was seriously distinguished from other groups or others. So the statutory interpretation pronounced by previous court would not bind normatively the judges called in subsequent cases. How do you see the merits of argument theoretically and in terms of any practical consequence we now consider? So the article purports to show that the court urging the descriptive claim that departure from the strong unity principle would be none. In numerous cases, courts, including the Supreme Court, have applied the contrary principle. The single term or phrase in a single statute provision may have multiple meanings. An interpretive approach that this article will call the polymorphic principle. As this article will show, courts employ the polymorphic principle in a variety of situations. Most commonly, when some special law of statutory interpretation calls for a particular construction of statute text in one circumstance, but has no application in other circumstances. Courts also sometimes employ the polymorphic principle when necessary as a pure policy matter. The article then takes on the court's normative assertion that the polymorphic principle is dangerous. The choice between the strong unitary principle and the polymorphic principle implicates a fundamental questions about the proper judicial role in our system of government. The Martinez opinion, this article suggests, cannot be understood independently of the identity of its author, Justice Scalia. Is very consistent justice about judicial law. So, as I introduced, Justice Scalia would see it undesirable or impermissible if we focus on the rest of history in construing the statute provision. How do you conceive? So that point is wide in many aspects. Nonetheless, will lack some practical merits about it. How do you assess? So actually, a point of contention and was described as campaign in Supreme Court about this viewpoint. How do you agree? The opinion does not simply endorse a particular rule of judicial statute construction. It represents a stage Justice Scalia's long-term campaign to limit judicial choice. By taking away judicial discretion to give a single piece of textual text multiple meanings, Justice Scalia hopes to further his goal of limiting the judicial role in our system of government. So, how do you delimit your scope of legal research when you undertake some questions from your client? What is actually you see in pages, for example, what justice it is what it provides an insight and what kind of great background to leading justices in research into any precise understanding of the statute problem analysis. That is the opposite view from another justice. What is his name? State Justice Stevens, for example. So you consider the basic viewpoint about legislature and statute, and in this week you will learn the statutory interpretation. Since you are now on the mixed phase of case laws and statutes. So how do you see? The article shows the Justice Scalia campaign and consequent embrace of strong unitary principle are misguided. And Professor Siegel also expounded that even those who seek to limit the role of judicial choice, where possible, should be reluctant to embrace it. As with so many textualist practices, the unitary principle does not, in fact, limit judicial choice. It only presents the illusion of doing so. Indeed, ironically, the strong unitary principle would often have the effect of magnifying the role of judicial choice in statutory interpretation.